Hey, everybody. Welcome to That Expert Show, where you help run the show. I'm Anna Canzano. We've got a great episode lined up for you today. We are talking about all things Instant Pot. This episode, we are so gracious and grateful for the sponsorship and support of Reflex Knee Clinic. If you are in knee pain or if you know somebody who is, check out reflexknees.com. They will help you with your knee pain and help you get back to life. Stick around and I will tell you more about why I am so passionate about what they do. All right, Instapot lovers, or people who've never even heard of the Instapot, or people who've bought the Instapot but they're afraid of it and they have it sitting in their box. They've bought it, but they are not yet courageous enough to pull it out of the box and start using it because it can be a little intimidating. That was my story. I bought this thing on a Black Friday and I literally didn't even open it for 3 months. It sat there because I don't know. I don't know why. I did not have the courage to use it until I went over to a friend's house and she literally sat me down and showed me her Instant Pot and showed me how easy it was to use. And that's where I decided, okay, I can do this. Now, bear in mind, the context here is that I haven't been a very good cook for most of my life. Like I had problems even in college figuring out how to properly cook, ramen noodles. And now here I am trying to cook for my family and I'm trying to prepare meals that they will actually eat. This device is a life changer. It really has made cooking so much easier. It's almost, I don't want to say it's impossible, but it's hard to screw up a meal in it, and we'll explain why in just a moment. We've got a great expert lineup for you today. She spent 10 years as an executive in the food industry with entities like the Food Network and Martha Stewart Living. Most recently, she has authored a whole book on how to cook with your Instant Pot and recipes. It's called Everyday Instant Pot, and she interestingly attended culinary school in Ireland at this place called Ballymaloe Cookery School. We'll have to ask her about that. She chronicles her traveling and cooking adventures at whatisinmypurse.com. Joining us live via Skype from San Francisco, Alexis Mersel. Alexis, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks, Anna. It's great to be here.
I've got to tell you, this particular topic has generated so much interest from people. I post about it in advance, as I always do, the topic of the show that we'll be doing next, and people love their Instapots, and they're really wanting to know more about them.
I love it. I've been known to accost people in Target or anywhere I see them with an Instant Pot to talk about it. I love this topic. It's such an undercover love, but once you get people going, it's amazing how much I can talk about, and they love it. And all the things that they've cooked, they love to rattle off everything that they've made in it, what they love about it. So I love it too.
I think it speaks to probably the versatility of this device, because I think the fear for a lot of us is like, I don't want to just buy another kitchen device that sits on the counter and takes up space. And I guess that was probably my hesitation at first. Like, can I really use this thing? Is it worth the investment? And what I've learned personally is that there are so many different things that you can do with it, so many different items that you can cook. Like, I still consider myself a newbie at it, but as we'll explore in this show, like, I've heard people bake cakes in their Instant Pots, which just sounds crazy to me.
Yes, cheesecake. Please make a cheesecake in your Instant Pot. It will change your life. It will change your life.
Let's tackle first the idea that a lot of people are scared initially to even use an Instant Pot. I think it's hilarious. I'm not the only one. Judy on Facebook says, mine stayed in the box for 3 weeks and she had to watch YouTube videos to get up her courage to turn it on. Karen on Facebook says she's afraid of hers. Patty says she got one for Christmas and she wants to know what to start with to get over her fear of it. What advice do you have for folks like that?
Well, you're not alone. Even Ina Garten has kept hers in her box in the garage. I read an article where she said she was scared to take it out of the box too. So you're not alone. I think you just have to get started. I was the same way. I looked at mine and I didn't know what to do. I invited a friend over who had also never used one before, which was kind of awesome because we both stared at it like a robot and then looked at the book, then got a little bit intimidated by the instruction book and just said, let's just get going. So we stared at the pot and then we started to push the buttons and then all of a sudden we were making an amazing Indian meal. So we can do it. anyone can do it. I would say you just have to get started. Don't just take it out of the box. That's the first step. Please take it out of the box.
You know, one of the funniest stories that I got on Facebook from someone was that she took it out of the box, and when she cooked her first meal with it, she sent her whole family away because that was just her like safety mechanism in case something went terribly wrong. And she said the meal that she cooked turned out just fine. John on Facebook wanted to know, what all does the InstantPot do that a crock pot doesn't do?
Interestingly, I hear that all the time. And granted, crock pots are amazing and I love them as well, but this cuts the cooking time in a fraction. So something would take you 8 hours in a crock pot can take you 30 to 45 minutes in the Instant Pot. The other amazing thing is that because it's pressure sealed, you don't lose any liquid when you're cooking. Crock pots, sometimes when you read the recipes, you have to continue to add liquid to it because a little bit will evaporate while it's cooking. So the liquid level is key in the crock pot as well, and sometimes you can dry it out and that can be an issue. This you don't have to worry about. When you put the liquid in and you close the pot, it's sealed. You'll open it. Actually, you'll get the steam that evaporates to show you really you haven't lost anything in the cooking process. So those are the two reasons that I love it. I know there are devout crock pot fans out there, but I have to also say that this can replace your crock pot. It can replace your rice cooker. It can replace your yogurt maker, a steamer. So you can do more in it, I would say, than you can in a crock pot. I know a lot of crock pot lovers get very, defensive about it. It also has a slow cook button, so you can use your crock pot recipes in here. You might have to adjust the liquid levels a little. Like I said, you won't lose any liquid in the pressure cooker, but you can also use some of your favorite recipes for the crock pot in this too.
Yeah, I mean, I, toiled around with a crock pot for a long time, but I have to admit, I don't think I've used it more than a couple of times since getting the Instant Pot. So it's kind of replaced that as a device in our home. Natalie on Facebook says, I literally have no idea what to do with my Instant Pot. What is a good starter tip besides taking it out of the box?
Yeah, taking it out of the box, number one. Actually, don't read the manual cover to cover, interestingly, because it can make you a little bit more hesitant to use it. I've had that feedback a lot. In my cookbook that you mentioned, Everyday Instant Pot, I broke it down to the basics to help you get started. So there's an Instant Pot primer that's just a couple pages, clear English. So hopefully reading that will help you get started. And I would say, really don't worry about all the buttons. That's the other thing that freaks people out. There's so many buttons, as you can see here. I have an Instant Pot 6-quart Duo Plus. I love this model. This is what I develop all my recipes in. It's pretty common. It's been around for a couple years, and it's great. There are so many models, so that's the other thing people always ask. Which one should I start with? Yes. I love recommending this one. Again, it's the Instant Pot Duo Plus. And it's the 6-quart size. They have a 3-quart, a 6-quart, and an 8-quart. I love the 6-quart because it's perfect for a family of 4 to 6 people in terms of size of recipes. If you have an 8-quart, that's great. You'll just need to add a little bit more liquid to it to get up to pressure. But I think 6-quart fits the bill for most people and families. And you really want to start with the basic settings, pressure cook being the most common setting. So that's right here. The other one you'll use a lot is saute mode, which I love because you don't have to have an extra saute pan on hand to do things before or after. You can do it all in the pot. I also love the steam function for fish, especially. One of the things I never did before a lot was cook fish because it smells up your whole kitchen, no matter what you do. But if you steam it in the pot, the smells stay in the pot. In 3 minutes on steam mode, you have perfect mouth-watering salmon. So that's another amazing function. And I wouldn't worry too much about the other functions to start. Get used to using the pressure cook function first, and then the saute, and kind of gradually build up and graduate to other levels. What the other functions really do is just kind of help you cheat a little bit. They'll set the timer and pressure level to the default that's most common for something like a soup or rice, etc. But I find too that people get kind of confused by that, and I think start by following some recipes, get used to it. Soup is usually cooking for 20 minutes, sometimes a little longer or shorter, but just get used to the basic functions and then move on. Not all models have all functions. So that's the other thing. That's why in my cookbook, I use mostly pressure cook and saute. So no matter what model you have, you don't have to worry about it. If you don't have a cake function on your pot, it's okay, because my cakes cook on the high pressure setting. So you're okay.
I love the tip about fish because I love making fish. You know, we're based here in the Pacific Northwest and salmon's like a staple of our diet, but I've only ever baked salmon or maybe poached it on the stove. I have not yet tried it in the InstantPot on the steam mode, so that's something that I will have to try. You know, the exciting part about this show is that we have people joining us live and submitting questions live. That's the whole concept of this, is that the viewers really help run the show. So I want to thank folks who are tuning in live right now. Heather, for example. Hi, Heather. She says that pressure sealed sounds like the old pressure cooker that I grew up with. I was always afraid when my mom put that thing on the stove. Do I need to be afraid of my InstantPot?
No, that's the other thing I hear a lot, that they heard pressure cookers used to explode back in the 40s when they were first invented. Those are the stovetop pressure cookers, also from the 1940s, not today. This is an electric pressure cooker that you plug into the wall and has so many safety measures, it will not explode. And the first thing you see when you go on the InstantPot website basically says that. They put so much into the safety features, it will not explode. You don't have to worry. I think the one thing, though, that people get a little freaked out about is when the steam releases. So on the top of the lid, I'll take it off to show you. It has lots of fun sounds. This is the sealing and venting knob. And this is the valve right here. So what happens is when the food is finished cooking, you can do something called a quick release or let the pressure release naturally. So if you look on all the Facebook groups for InstantPot, you'll see QR, NR. So QR stands for quick release, NR stands for natural release. The reason to choose one or the other is basically how much liquid is in the pot. You want to let the pressure come down a little bit naturally first so that it doesn't go all over your face and all over your kitchen, which is what I hear also. It just went everywhere. I'm saying, well, you might not have waited long enough. But what happens is this valve, when it has released the pressure, will fall back down and you won't see it. When you turn this knob, which is a little wobbly, some people are a little confused by that. It still is wobbly even when you turn it to sealing, which is at the top, or venting, which is at the bottom. So after something has finished cooking, you're going to turn it down to venting, and you can see these little holes here. That's where the steam will come out. What I suggest is do not use your bare hands to move this knob. Either use a kitchen towel or an oven mitt or even kitchen tongs. Sometimes I cheat and I use like a wooden spoon if it's just lying around, and I kind of like hit it a little bit. And then you want to make sure that you're not standing over it, because that's where the steam will come from. So if you don't wait even just 5 minutes or 10 minutes for it to come down to pressure a little bit, you'll probably get a lot of steam coming out in your face, and that kind of freaks people out, but it's not going to explode. I would just say make sure you're not putting your face over it or using your bare hands, and then you're fine.
Interesting. And so, and if it hasn't vented properly, either naturally or because you've released the steam manually, it literally won't open. Like, that's the part that I feel better about, because
Yes.
it will just stay locked unless that pressure has been released, which is the part where, you know, you're not going to blow up your house with this thing.
Right. And it won't come to pressure either if it's not sealed. So there's a safety measure going up and coming down from pressure, so you don't have to worry. And you'll hear the valve drop too once it's done. So you'll see the steam start to fizzle down and down and down, and then you'll hear plunk, and then the valve is dropped, and then you're okay. And like I said, there's all these great sounds. So when I put the pot on, it makes this fun sound to say it's closed, and when I open it, it makes the fun sound to say it's open. So awesome. You can't blow it up. Don't worry.
A couple of questions on just some basic food staples. Like, I know that you've authored a whole book on recipes, but we're not going to walk through individual, recipes line by line. I think that would take too long for this show. But I do want to cover, for people who are already using the InstantPot, some fundamental cooking techniques. And then later in this show, we'll also, explore more advanced InstantPot cooking techniques, because I've heard heard. I haven't done it myself, but there's like multi-layer cooking, and there's all kinds of fancy things that you can do with this once you're more familiar with the InstantPot. So there's really something in this show for everybody. I wanted to cover something that a couple of people brought up because, this is just kind of a basic staple as well. Chicken breasts. Stephanie on Facebook and Vanessa on Facebook both want to know, what is the best way to cook chicken breasts? Vanessa in particular says she can't seem to get them to come out tender. They come out rubbery. So what's your advice for them?
Most likely they're cooking them for too long. Chicken breasts were one of those foods that I completely didn't believe would cook in 4 minutes. I literally said, no way, Jose, is that going to cook in 4 minutes to perfection. But it does. That's the other thing that you have to sort of take all your old thoughts about cooking times out of your head and just think about this pot. Chicken breasts cook in 4 minutes. Boneless, skinless chicken thighs will cook in about 10 to 15, depending on the recipe. Like I said, salmon cooks in 3 minutes on the steam setting. So you really have to forget about everything you know about cooking and when you start to use this pot. I would say 4 minutes is the golden ticket for chicken breast cooking time. And then also the liquid level is very key, and the moisture that you're giving the chicken breast. So chicken breasts are one of those cuts that are traditionally drier. That's why I love using boneless, skinless chicken thighs, because they're richer in flavor and texture, and they can stand the pressure even longer. So you'll see that in the book, a lot of the soups I use boneless, skinless chicken thighs, because they really can be in the pot for 20 minutes or more, and they're still fine. I would say for chicken breasts, it's a little bit more specific and precise. You don't want to overcook them or they'll be rubbery. The other thing I do like to cook them, though, in is soups. You can just throw them in the pot with some basic chicken broth and some carrots, celery, onions, etc., and cook for about 10 minutes, and then cook them as a whole breast. And then when you take it out, let it come down from pressure a little bit, about 10 minutes. Take them out, shred them with a fork, and put them back into the soup, and they'll be amazing. So I would say the more moisture you can add, the better. Don't overcook them. And if you're okay with it, start with the thighs, because I think they're a little bit more foolproof than the breasts. The breasts take a little bit more. Also with breasts, the thickness can vary. You don't really want to cook those super thin ones, the ones that you use for frying and really thin dishes with breading. Those are going to be too rubbery. I would get nice thick breasts and not overcook them. Make sure there's enough liquid in them.
Something that's interesting about this is what's been fun is to be able to cook healthy food for my family. Like, I'm always trying to, avoid too much fried food and trying to get the kids to eat vegetables. It's been cool because they will actually eat cauliflower and carrots that come out of the InstantPot, because normally they're cooked with some kind of broth, and it just makes them taste so much better. Obviously healthy eating is part of healthy living, and part of healthy living is also exercise, which I just wanted to mention here real quick. Exercising is hard if you're dealing with knee pain, if you've had an acute injury, or if you've had some kind of genetic history when it comes to knee pain. That's why I want to encourage you to talk with the folks at Reflex Knee Clinic. These folks helped my husband, and by default helped me so much. My husband was an athlete growing up, extensive exercise in his history, and he wound up needing 3 knee surgeries. But he still was in so much pain and not able to do the things that he really loved, exercising and running and just even playing with the kids, helping them learn how to ride their bikes. So he went to Reflex Knee Clinic. They gave him stem cell treatment and PRP treatment, which is platelet-rich plasma. It is cutting-edge technology. These are non-surgical methods that they help people with, and he has had no knee pain since. I'm not even kidding you. I'm not lying to you. This is like our real-life story. You can check out his case study at reflexknees.com. You can see how they have helped him and other people get back to life. Again, before you go under the knife for some kind of knee surgery, talk to the folks at Reflex Knee Clinic and they will help you get back to life. Just had to mention that and put that plug in there for them because they have been amazing. Getting back to talk about the Instant Pot, the folks that were asking about chicken also mentioned something, Alexis, about a burn notice, which sounds so scary to me. I don't know exactly what that is. I've never actually gotten the burn notice, so maybe I'm just lucky. But Melissa on Instagram, for example, says that she just got her Instapot and she keeps getting the burn notice while she's cooking chicken. She feels like she has adequate liquid in there. Same with Margie on Facebook, who says she added more water, but the burn notice is still there and the sauce is watery and she was just trying to make lentil soup or something like that.
That's interesting because I would say the number one thing to check to troubleshoot the burn notice is the liquid level. I've never gotten it either, so I'm either fortunate or lucky or figured this out somehow. I would say if it's continuing to happen and the user is confident that there's enough liquid in the pot, then to reach out directly to InstantPot. They have an amazing customer service team that I've reached out to plenty of times when I was authoring the book. And I think that would probably be the best idea. It could be a defect with their specific pot. Anyone that has mentioned it to me that I have said increase the liquid level has then been okay. So I'm fairly confident that it is about the liquid level. Some recipes, you do use the saute mode first, and that can get quite hot. So if you don't cancel and maybe let the pot cool off for a minute or two before you move on to pressure cooking, if you're having the burn notice, that could be another trick to try. But you definitely, if you're starting on saute mode, the pot can get pretty hot, which means you might even need to add a little bit more liquid. If you're starting from cold, you should be fine to follow a recipe of how much liquid you need. Generally, it's about 1.5 to 2 cups of liquid to come up to pressure, some less, but if you're steaming something, you usually use about 1.5 to 2 cups of liquid underneath the steam rack before it will come up to pressure. So I would say definitely check the liquid levels, and if it's happening consistently, to reach out to InstantPot because there are so many different models and there are so many different sizes within the model and features, etc. So it might be best to just reach out to them directly.
You bring up a good point, the InstantPot customer service, because there's not just InstantPot pressure cookers out there now. There are other models. Sharon, for example, on Facebook was recommending that we all stick with the InstantPot brand because they have exemplary customer service. Do you have some thoughts on that? Is one InstantPot pressure cooker the same as some other non-InstantPot brand?
To be fair, I've only used the InstantPot, so I can't personally compare it to others. I have friends who have other models, whether it's the Breville or there's one made by the Ninja company, who've also spoken highly of it. I think in general, pressure cooking is pretty consistent from pot to pot, but the features and the functions will be different. So I would say, for me personally, I stick with the InstantPot model. One of the reasons because of the customer service. Another reason is a lot of the information when I share and look at the Facebook groups and etc. are also using the InstantPot model. So I wanted to make sure that I was developing recipes for the large group of users. Mm-hmm. But I wouldn't say that other models aren't great. I think it's again a matter of just opening the box, trying things out, reading the book a little bit, but don't get intimidated by the book. Start with a few recipes, some easy ones to start with, and then keep going, and I think you'll get hang of it. Whatever I've found when I talk to people is after they've gotten through like 1 or 2 recipes, they feel like they're a pro, and I would say that that's true across the board.
One of the cool things about the Instant Pot is I am not a thaw frozen food and cook it kind of person. Like once food goes into the freezer, it's like dead to me. I don't have a responsible enough mind to like take it out and thaw it in advance and make it ready for my family. So Lynn, for example, on Facebook says, if you are cooking from frozen, how much longer do you need to add for a regular Instapot recipe? And so she brings this up because you can literally put frozen food into the Instapot and somehow it magically cooks and comes out as if it weren't frozen before it went in.
Yes. And I would say it will depend on what you're cooking. So there's not a one size fits all in saying add 5 minutes to everything, because it will depend on whether you're cooking a hearty meat like a beef chuck, etc., or something more delicate like shrimp or fish, etc. So one of my favorite cheats actually for the pot is when I'm making a soup, whether it's a seafood soup or even a vegetarian soup, I actually use frozen and I throw it in at the end after it's pressure cooked. So there's a seafood chowder recipe in the book. This is the book that I'm referring to. There's a seafood chowder recipe, and actually you don't even put the seafood into the chowder at pressure mode. And you can use frozen seafood, frozen shrimp, frozen pieces of cod or halibut, etc. And after you do the pressure cooking, you let it release for a few minutes, open the lid. It's still going to be really, really hot. You don't even need to turn it on to saute mode. It's that hot. And shrimp in general cook in a few minutes anyway. So whether you're using fresh shrimp or frozen shrimp, fresh shrimp would cook in about 2 minutes in that heat. Frozen maybe a little closer to 4 or 5 minutes. You can tell when they've turned opaque and a nice pink color. You can put them in the hot liquid and then you're done. And you don't have to worry about them turning rubbery, etc. Frozen corn is also another great trick. You can put frozen corn in at the end of a soup, just into the hot liquid, and maybe 2 minutes, if that. It will be thawed out and cooked perfectly. So I love that cheat because I also don't like to think about defrosting the night before. I know there's so many people who are organized and plan ahead. Before they go to work, they have it all sorted out. That is not me. I also hate soaking beans overnight because I forget to, and then all of a sudden there'll be dinner and I want to eat some sort of beans and whoops, I forgot to soak them, so I have to resort to canned beans. But I love that the pot cooks dry beans with no soaking required in sometimes as little as 15 minutes. Lentils can cook in 15 minutes. Other beans somewhere between 25 to 40, depending on the bean. So you don't have to think about it at all ahead of time. You literally can just put in the water, put in the beans, close the lid, boom, and then take those beans and make an amazing hummus. And it also will change your life because I've always made hummus from canned beans because I forget to soak them. And since I've started making it with dried beans in the Instant Pot, you use a little bit of the cooking liquid from the beans. When you blend them up in the blender, you add some tahini, some olive oil, lemon, some spices if you like paprika, you can add that, salt and pepper, and then you have hummus in under an hour, and it's perfect. So I love cooking from frozen also, and I would say just look at the recipe depending on the cut of meat you're using and follow that. Generally, it's only a few more minutes. You usually don't even need to add too much liquid extra because when you freeze things, you know they kind of hold the liquid with them. So when you thaw frozen vegetables, you'll get a lot of liquid. So you usually don't even need to add too much more liquid. But I would say for that, definitely defer to the recipe, and it's absolutely possible to cook from frozen.
Okay. And then you can make yogurt. I guess I have a friend who's really excited about the yogurt that she makes with her Instant Pot. Some of the versions actually have a yogurt button, which I guess makes it easier theoretically. But Diane on Facebook wants to know, how do you make yogurt if your Instant Pot does not have a yogurt button?
That's one of those features that's nice to have, I would say. And if you have it, great, because it sort of takes the thinking away. Yogurt is a multi-step process, so the results are amazing, but it does require a few steps. So it's not that you're just going to throw in some milk and some yogurt starter in there, close it up, and then open it, and you're going to have yogurt. Because it's fermented, it takes a few steps to get it right and also to make it safe. So a lot of the steps are really there to make sure that it's being cooked at the safe temperatures and being cooled to safe temperature to make sure that everything is copacetic. But I would say then you can look at a recipe for it that doesn't use a yogurt setting, but you can do the same thing on the high and low pressure settings with a similar amount of time if you don't have a yogurt button on your machine, and you'll get the same results. But again, with everything, I feel like a broken record. I say try it and experiment with it because everyone also has different preferences on how they like their food. For example, rice, you might like it a little drier, might like it a little wetter, same with oatmeal, steel cut oats, etc. So play around with how you like it, and then when you get it right, just write it down and say, okay, I did my steel cut oats for 10 minutes with this amount of milk and this amount of water, etc., and this is how I like it perfectly. So the yogurt without a yogurt button, you might need to play around with a little bit as well, but you can just use the pressure cook settings And again, it is a multi-step process. So just definitely read the recipe on that one. That's not one to just wing and guess at. So you don't want to get sick from it. But it does have amazing results. And I've also heard people saying they're never buying store-bought yogurt ever again because it's just amazing.
Yep, that's what my friend says. Sidoni has a question about pot roast. She's asking this on Instagram. She says she just can't get her pot roast in the InstantPot to be close to how good it is in the crock pot. Any tips on that?
So as an Instant Pot lover, I have to say that I defer to the Instant Pot because I don't cook it for 8 hours, 6 hours, etc. I would say the cut of meat is important. So I love to use a boneless beef chuck. It's also great because that's usually an inexpensive cut of meat. So you're really getting a lot for your money. You can do it two ways. If you're trying to cook it as a whole roast and that's not working out, cut it into smaller pieces, maybe 2 by 2 inch cubes, and do it that way. You can compare the results and see if they're any better. I'm not sure if the issue is with flavor or with texture or both, but pot roast, definitely the more flavor, the better. Make sure you're using enough salt and pepper at the end. So check the seasoning before you serve it. Make sure there's a lot of onions and a lot of the other good stuff in that you put into the pot roast before you get started. But if the whole roast isn't coming out like you like it, try cutting it into chunks, as big or as small as you want, and play around with that. I would say it should, in theory, work even better because you're not losing any liquid from the pot, whereas in a crock pot you'll get a little bit escape, and sometimes you have to add more liquid, like I mentioned earlier in the show. So in theory, the liquid should be okay if you're making sure, though, you're adding enough liquid. If you're trying to convert, though, a crock pot recipe with that amount of liquid to a pressure cooking recipe, you might even be using too much liquid. So you might have extra liquid on the bottom, which is fine. Just know that. And it wouldn't absorb completely. A lot of times what I found in a crock pot, the meat, whatever you're cooking, absorbs all the liquid. So when it's done, you take the lid off and there's this beautiful piece of whatever and all the liquid is gone. The one thing to know about the pressure cooker is that's not always the case, and that's okay. You can just take the meat out. There'll be a little bit of extra liquid in the bottom sometimes, and that's great because you need that liquid to get up to pressure. But you can turn on the saute mode, simmer it for a little bit, thicken it up, and pour it over as an au jus or a sauce on top of whatever you're cooking. So that's also great. But if she's worried, if the user's worried about having some liquid left in the pot, that's okay in the pressure cooker because it's, again, not evaporating when you're cooking.
I like that idea, sauteing the leftover juices and turning it into like a sauce. Yum. Josephine on Facebook wants to know where she can get Asian food recipes for her Instapot. I wonder what your ideas are on that, or maybe if there are some fundamentals when it comes to cooking Asian food.
Yes. So there's a few recipes in the book. Again, I have an awesome Korean style short rib recipe in here that seems to be very popular. But in terms of fundamentals, what I love, there's also a section here called building blocks that will help you learn to take your protein, your flavorings, and your serving ideas and mix and match them. And that's where I really think the pot becomes amazing, because you don't have to follow a recipe verbatim every single time you open it. Once you get comfortable, people love to play around, and I encourage it. I would say you find a marinade that you love, then try it on a different cut of meat, and then maybe serve it a different way. So one night you can take short ribs, cook them with the Korean marinade and serve them traditionally. Another time you can actually like shred up the ribs, put them over some brown rice and make a burrito bowl. Or you can put carnitas in a tortilla and make tacos, or burrito from that. So I would say mix and match. There's a section here called building blocks that I mentioned. Mix and match the way you're cooking the protein, the flavor, and the serving ideas. But in terms of Asian food, I love the Korean marinade. I also have a beef and broccoli, which is basic, a basic starting recipe, which the trick there is you don't actually put the broccoli in pressure setting because that might overcook it. But you can use the saute mode to start, and you basically quickly steam it, take it out, leave it aside, pressure cook the meat, and then you throw the broccoli back in at the end after you've cooked the meat and reduced the sauce a little bit, and then it's an all-in-one pot recipe. Another recipe that's really popular in the book is the chicken adobo burrito bowls, and that everyone has always asked, what should I use to get started? I would absolutely say something like that, because you're using boneless, skinless chicken thighs. You don't need to saute them or brown them or anything. You make a quick vinegar marinade with soy sauce, vinegar, sugar. Then you put some onions in the pot, you put your chicken thighs, you pour the vinegar over, add some seasonings, close the pot, cook it for 15 minutes, open it up, and then you have perfectly tender chicken. And then you can put that over brown rice if you like, with some yummy toppings, or you can put it again in a tortilla and call it a burrito, etc. Totally kid friendly. I find that kids love to mix and match the toppings on top or inside, and you really have only used one setting, the pressure cook setting. But as you had mentioned, Anna, that we can sort of graduate to higher levels. Once you get comfortable with just throwing it all in your pot and walking away, you can start to use things like the saute mode to brown the meat before you start a recipe, which will add flavor. So color equals flavor. So if you brown the meat a little bit before you get started, you'll have even better results at the end. The other thing you can do that I've included in the book, some bonus steps. So if you really want to take it to the next level, you can preheat your broiler and put in some, like I have in my sweet and spicy carnitas recipe. After they come out of the pot, if you really want to kick it up a notch, you can throw them in the broiler for a few minutes, and then you get the little crispy edges, which I love so much. So you can really, it's really like a choose your own adventure style cooking. If you want to start basic, where you just put everything in the pot, close the lid and let it go, that's awesome, and definitely start there. But then play around, use the saute mode either to brown in the beginning, to reduce sauces at the end, or like I mentioned before, that cheat where you can throw in frozen shrimp into a soup and then you're done. Or you can also turn the oven on if you're making a bread pudding or a French toast in the pot, which is another thing we haven't talked about, but sweets are great in here. You can also, if you want to mimic the results that you would get in the oven, you can just turn your oven on and put it in the oven for 10 minutes at the end, and you'll get a nice crispy top. So you get the best of both worlds. You get the steamed, beautifully moist center of the French toast, the baked French toast or bread pudding, and then you get that nice crispy top at the end. So it's all about experimenting and playing around.
Okay, I definitely want to get to the whole baking in your InstantPot thing in just a minute, because that just, again, blows my mind. I can't even fathom how that is done. With the Asian food thing, this is the one contribution I can make to this cooking episode. Because I have been able to, look, I'm humble, I'm no expert. The one contribution I can make is that I have been able to replicate, more or less, my mom's recipe for kind of like a teriyaki chicken. So I use thighs, I throw in some minced garlic and some sesame oil. Sesame oil is actually the key. And a little bit of onion, maybe, if you've got it, but it's not necessary. So garlic and sesame oil, and I do saute the chicken breasts with that, and then I throw in some soy sauce, and the key is to add a little bit of sweet. So for my mom, she uses brown sugar, but I love agave nectar, so I'll just kind of dump some agave nectar in there and stir it up, and then put the pressure cooker mode on and walk away, and it's more or less foolproof. So that's my contribution to this cooking episode, besides just asking you the questions.
Well, I'm definitely going to get that recipe from you now, so that's awesome. Very excited.
Except it's like my style of cooking, I don't measure anything. I just eyeball it the way that my mom did it, so I don't have anything to really write down except for the ingredients that I just told you. Okay, so let's get to that baking stuff, because I can't even imagine. You said cheesecake. Lynn wants to know the guidelines for making a cake in the InstantPot and how long you cook a cake and what the release time would be.
So again, it depends on the cake. I'm a huge fan of cheesecake because it was such a laborious effort to make it in the oven that I basically stopped making it, even though I love it, because you need to create what's called a bain-marie, or a water bath, where you have to carefully put the tray of the cheesecake batter into another pan, fill it with hot water, carefully put it in the oven, and then when it's done, you're now looking at this hot pan, hot water, hot oven, and you're trying to take it out without messing it up, and that's just too much trouble for me. So basically, you're creating a steam bath in the InstantPot for the cheesecake. You make it very similarly to the way you would make a regular cheesecake, which is pretty simple. The cream cheese, the eggs, sugar, any flavoring. I love using lemon. If you're in California, Meyer lemons are amazing. and just using an electric mixer or a KitchenAid mixer to whip it up. My cheat for the crust, so you don't have to bake it, is to use ginger snap cookies. And then you just use a food processor to crunch them up, and you don't have to bake it because they're a really, really hearty cookie. Heartier than graham crackers, which oftentimes you do need to bake ahead. But in the recipe in the book, you don't have to bake the crust ahead. So you whiz up some ginger snap cookies, put them on the bottom of the pan, pour the batter over, and then you basically use the steam rack, and you put water on the bottom, and you use the steam rack to bake the cheesecake. You cover it with foil, and the reason that you do that is to keep the condensation from when the pot builds up to pressure and comes down from dripping into the cheesecake and making little dents, because, of course, if you're baker perfectionist like I am, you don't want little dents in your cheesecake. You don't have to use the foil, but there's no reason not to, really, just to keep the extra water out. And then the steam rack, which we haven't talked about, is amazing. It comes with the pot. Most newer models, some older models, they just do not have the steam rack, and that's okay. You can create a sling using foil. I mentioned that in the book on how to do that. But if you do have the machine with the steam rack, this is what it is. It has little handles, which is amazing. So you basically just put the cheesecake pan on top. You use these handles to lower it into the pot and back out of the pot. Again, I'd use pot holders because it is going to be hot. Sometimes I get lazy and I don't, which is not smart. But if you use pot holders to take it in and out of the pot, then you have the cheesecake baked like you would if you did it in the oven. You don't have to worry about the water bath or spilling the water bath all over you. You let it sit on the counter to come to room temperature, just like you would if you were doing cheesecake the traditional way. And then you put it in the fridge for 2 hours or up to overnight, and then it's perfect. So cheesecake, definitely. Anything that would be steamed, like a custard or rice pudding, is amazing. You can do chocolate lava cakes in there. You can use individual ramekins and stack them on the steam rack and cook chocolate lava cakes. You can also do traditional cakes. They will be a little more dense. So to help offset that, I would get a bundt pan, a 6-quart bundt pan that will fit in the pot. You can get them on Amazon very inexpensively, and use a recipe, because you'll probably need to adjust the leavening agent, which is baking soda, baking powder, or a combination of, just to account for the pressure. But I would say if you want to start with dessert, start with cheesecake, because again, it will change your life, or other steamed desserts.
I'm gonna this is like a drinking game, or we're just gonna take a shot every time you say the InstantPot's gonna change your life.
Awesome.
Or me. I think I've said it as well. Rhonda wants to know, I'm so going to explore the whole baking side of that, but that's going to be a high learning curve for me, I think. Rhonda on Facebook wants to know about easy kid-friendly recipes. Do you have some fundamental ideas for her?
Yes, 2 of the ones I mentioned already. So the beef and broccoli, absolutely kid-friendly. You can, of course, substitute broccoli for anything else. You want to use cauliflower. If you want to use bok choy, you can use snap peas, whatever the kids like, a combination of them. I also love what I mentioned before, the chicken adobo burrito bowls, because so much about kids is letting them to participate so they can put their own toppings on it, whether they want, cherry tomatoes or some black beans or some corn, change up the kind of rice. So if you have the great thing about it is you can cook in bulk, keep some things in your fridge. Then when the chicken comes out of the pot, just take all the stuff that you've had in your fridge out on the counter, set it up really fun, playfully, and let the kids just add as they like. So that's another great idea. Hummus is fun. You can do lots of different, kid-friendly veggies and pita chips, etc. So that's another great option with a lot of protein from the beans. Tacos, one of my favorite things ever, but also in the Instant Pot. I mentioned the carnitas recipe that I have in the book. So basically, it's a giant piece of pork shoulder, often called pork butt as well, that cooks in there and then cooks to perfection, 45 minutes. That's it. Then you again shred it up with 2 forks. Sometimes you don't even need the forks. You can just use your hands. And that's another way you can get kids involved. They can shred it too. And then put it in a tortilla, add some crispy cabbage to it, or some pico de gallo salsa, whatever you have on hand. Everything works well with pork. So I would say those are great starting recipes. Chicken noodle soup is great. Chicken zoodle soup is great. I have a recipe for that coming out in my next book, which will be out in the summer, for healthy, where you can use zucchini noodles instead of traditional pasta to cook chicken soup. So there's a myriad of recipes. It depends on what your kids are into, but I think the tacos, short ribs, the chicken adobo burrito bowls, hummus, beef and broccoli. There's also something I have called Thanksgiving dinner, where you cook turkey breasts or chicken breasts in the pot with stuffing. We didn't talk about the pot-in-pot method, but you can do that. You can put something on the bottom of the pot, and then again, the steam rack goes over it, and you put a casserole dish on top of that, and then you make a stuffing, close it up, cook both together, and then voila, you have Thanksgiving dinner in a pot. So that's also would be great for kids too. I don't know anyone who doesn't love turkey and stuffing, so that's a good one too.
Yeah, that actually brings us to the thing I want to know about, because I'm still a newbie, but I have goals of getting to that multi-layered cooking that you mentioned. Pot in pot was not a term that I had even heard before. So what advice do you have on that? Because every time I've ever tried multi-layer cooking, it's not worked out. I want to say the only time I've succeeded at it was with the chicken and maybe some cauliflower on top. And the cauliflower was nice because it had the flavor of the chicken. But all other times I've just kind of managed to screw it up, and like neither item is really good. Both wind up being mediocre. But you're saying that you can take one item, cook it on the bottom, put the steam rack thing on top of that, and put another pot on top of that and cook something else to keep it separated, but still, yeah. Can you go into that?
Yes, absolutely. So again, it will depend on what you're cooking, but you can do it a few different ways. So the Thanksgiving dinner I was just referring to is basically you follow the recipe, but the recipe ideally should have kind of accounted for the highs and lows amount of time for each item. Ideally, you aren't going to obviously dry out one and overcook the other, etc. So it's not a like catch-all for anything. You can't just throw two things in the pot and close the lid and be like, I'll just pick 20 minutes because that's halfway between them, and then it works. But something like that, you can cook something on the bottom of the pot with enough liquid. So you cover the chicken breast or turkey breasts with chicken broth and seasonings, etc. And then you take a 1.5 quart casserole dish, which is key. I would definitely recommend buying one if you don't have it, because it fits in the pot. You can cook anything in it, from baked French toast or bread pudding or steamed pudding for dessert or stuffing, etc. You can cook frittata in it. It's just a really easy, great way. Again, you don't have to clean the pot. You just take it out using the steam rack and its handles. Usually cover it again with foil just so the condensation doesn't get into whatever's in that pot. The other thing, you can do something like chicken and rice as well, where you're following the recipe in terms of how much liquid to use, but you can just put the rice on the bottom, marinate the chicken in some sort of flavorings, put that on top of the rice, submerge it all together, and then close the lid. And then if you're following the recipe in terms of time and liquid level, what should happen is that the rice absorbs the liquid, and then you have the chicken cooked nicely and soft on top, and then you have a one-pot meal too. So there's a few ways to do it. It's fun to experiment, but I would definitely say, again, follow the recipe to start, and then you can swap out different flavorings, or you can swap out different proteins. You can change up the rice, but not necessarily, because brown rice takes 15 minutes, white rice only takes 4. So you need to account for that. There's some things that are not mix and matchable as well as others. But there's a lot if you look for PIP on any of those Facebook groups for InstantPot fans, you'll see a lot of people talking about the pot-in-pot method. A lot of it is just for easy cleanup and not having to get it out of the pot inner lining itself. This is the inner lining.
I'm going to have to work on my InstantPot lingo here, because you've thrown out all these different terms. I've got one last question for you, and I know there are more questions that we don't have time to get to, but I'm going to invite Alexis to answer those questions for folks after the fact on the various social media accounts, if you'd be willing to do that.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I have one question I have to ask because it's come up repeatedly, and it's about the stinky silicone rings. Jack on Facebook wants to know that, a lot of people are complaining about that. They aren't successfully deodorizing the silicone ring that helps seal in the pressure. Maybe, you have a surefire method for how to deal with that.
There's a few ways you can go about it. You can do the lazy way, which is mine, and I very rarely clean it. And I don't notice a difference in terms of the flavor in the food that I'm cooking. The pot itself might retain an odor, but for some reason, some magical reason, it doesn't usually transfer to the food. Not that I've ever noticed. So I'll cook something with cumin in it and then turn it around and make a cheesecake. And the cheesecake does not taste of cumin, even though you might smell it a little bit. So there's the lazy man way, which is my way. Or you can actually take the sealing ring out, which is this piece right here, and put it in the dishwasher. That's really easy to do. You can do that every so often. It depends on how much you use your pot. If you're using it like 3 times a day, every day, you might want to do that more often. But you just do it occasionally, put it in the top rack of the dishwasher. It's dishwasher safe. If you really, really find that it's not deodorizing, you can make a white vinegar water bath and just let it soak for as long as you can handle the smell of vinegar in your kitchen, because usually vinegar is an amazing cleaning agent anyway, so it will deodorize it, clean it off, and then once you're done with this soak, you can just hand wash it with a little soap. The key is to let it dry separately. Don't put the wet ring back into the pot, because then it's not going to completely get all the odors off. So let it dry separately. You can put it out in the sun. You can put it on a paper towel on your kitchen shelf. Let it completely dry, and then put the sealing ring back in. So you can, any amount of effort you want to put forward, you can either just not worry about it, you can throw it in the top rack of your dishwasher, or you can make a vinegar and water bath, soak it in that, use some hand soap, and then dry it completely and put it back in. Awesome. And that should take care of it. You can also buy more and switch them out. So if you do a lot of savory and sweet cooking, you can have one for sweet and one for savory if you want to do that. They're inexpensive also on Amazon to buy extras. So, and this is the one part that might sort of, after 18 months or a year, might start to like go. So you might want to replace that. The pot is really durable, but the ring, depending on how much you use it, might start to go. So you can, if you're having any issues with sealing or coming up to pressure, just replace the ring, and that should take care of it.
Awesome. Alexis, any parting thoughts, just kind of things that you want to leave us with today?
Just get started. That's what I tell everyone who said to me that they're scared to use it. Just get started. Cook something easy. Find a recipe for something that you're really interested in. See how it works. Open the box. Don't be scared. All of those great things.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all of your expertise today. Man, there's so much to review there. I'll be creating a tip sheet based on the information that you've shared in this episode, so people can actually print that out and take a look at it. Sometimes it's easier to look at something than to take it in an audio sort of way or a video sort of way. So Alexis, appreciate you being with us today.
Great. Thank you, Anna. It was great.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us for this episode of That Expert Show. I hope it was helpful to you, no matter what level of Instant Pot cooking that you are at. Remember, you can always connect with us on our various social media accounts. I'm on Facebook at Anna Canzano, on Twitter and Instagram at That Expert Show. And, you know, sometimes it's hard to catch a show live like this. We are live every Monday at 11 a.m. Pacific time, but we also put this content back out to you on our YouTube channel, That Expert Show, and as podcasts on Apple iTunes, Google Play, wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. You can find us there, or you can just check out our website, thatexpertshow.com. We have all the information along with that tip sheet that I mentioned posted there as well. Hey, really appreciate you being with us and learning with us, and hope that you can join us for the next episode of That Expert Show. We'll be talking about wedding planning. So if you know a bride-to-be or a groom-to-be coming up that can benefit from that episode, let them know about it as well. Hey, thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time on That Expert Show, where you help run the show.